Well, the U.S. economy is headed for a major crash because our economic growth, particularly over the past 7 or 8 years, has been phony. Because our growth has been a function of how much we've borrowed and spent, not how much we've saved and produced. Because you had millions of homeowners that really thought they won the lottery. They looked at home prices that had been bid up in a speculative bubble and assumed that that equity was legitimate wealth, and they borrowed trillions of dollars collateralized by that, expecting that by the time the payments reset higher, they would have all this extra home equity that they can also tap into. And now that that is not panning out, Americans are losing their home equity. They're saddled with trillions of dollars of mortgages that we really can't afford to pay. And all the consumption that went along with the perception of real estate wealth is going to evaporate. And now you're going to see a collapse in our economy because it's 70% consumption, and we can't consume anymore because we can't borrow money from abroad to do it, and we don't have the home equity. There's basically two premises or two parts of my book. The first part of the book is to really explain what's going on. And in fact, people reading my book today have the benefit of the fact that a lot of the predictions I've made have already come to pass. I mean, especially my chapter on bursting of the real estate bubble, the coming real estate debacle. Pretty much everything that I wrote has panned out, and it's gone exactly the way I wrote it would. And the second part of my book really deals with ways of protecting your wealth. One is to make sure you have precious metals in your account, gold and silver and other, real inflation hedges. And then, rethinking your stock portfolio. The idea is to sell your U.S. stocks and replicate a portfolio of diversified stocks outside the United States. There's a lot of misinformation or disinformation deliberately put out by the government about inflation because government creates inflation, but they don't want anybody to know that. So they try to confuse the public into believing that inflation is rising prices rather than the result of inflation, which is the increase in the money supply. The main reason they create inflation is because they want to wipe out the value of their debts, because inflation benefits debtors. The government, of course, is the world's biggest debtor. Americans are debtors. We owe the rest of the world, so we want to inflate that debt away. And politicians want to play Santa Claus. They want to pretend that they can give people money without taking it from them first through taxation. So they do it surreptitiously through creating inflation. They just print money and they spend it into the economy. And people get that new money and they think they're getting a benefit from government. But all government is doing is debasing all the money that's already out there. So sure, you get a little bit more money, but now you need more money because everything costs more. One of the most important parts about the book, about Crash Proof, and one of the reasons I wrote it, is to take complex economic terms and situations and really break them down using analogies and make it very simple for people to really understand, why we're in this mess, how we got into this mess. And it's a great book to do that. I mean, in the introduction, it's America.com, The Illusion of Wealth. And in the jacket of my book, I wrote about that our economy was a house of cards. Impressive on the outside, but a disaster waiting to happen beneath the surface. And so I think that crash, that collapse that I envisioned has already begun. So it's happening now, and it's going to take a long time. And of course, the government, the central bankers, the politicians are going to do their best to try to slow the progress of this collapse. Of course, that only makes it worse. It'd be much better to bite the bullet sooner and deal with these issues rather than creating even more inflation and piling more debt onto the problem. So you got to understand what's happening, and then you got to protect yourself and your family from the consequences.